So this is a fascinating topic. I have not barely even been exposed to this. So there's some sort of a shadow banking system being set up here. And I lost my screen share. 1 second. Um, some sort of a shadow banking system being set up where we're having dollars being traded between some countries here. They're depositing treasuries. What's going on, Lucas? I don't know what the shadow dollar is.
Okay, well, for starters, I want to make an attribution to who I was alerted to this from, and that's Kathleen Tyson. And if you don't know or follow Kathleen Tyson, I suggest people find and follow her if you're interested in what's going on with central banks and international commerce and international banking.
And
And
as always, there's extensive show notes when we post things to YouTube. So if you're trying to catch up on anything, if you caught this after the fact, you can always get those in the archive there.
eh, wonderful. And Kathleen Tyson, by the way, was one of the architects of the euro. Um, she's British, but not some crackpot who is floating conspiracy theories out on Twitter. So anyway, I always follow Kathleen Tyson because she has great insight into the histories of various countries and their relationships and what the actual nuts and bolts are going on behind their trade relations. So she posted the other day that it was very interesting that China had cut a deal with Saudi Arabia, and we know that China has bought a massive amount of United States Treasury debt and holds a massive amount of that debt. Yeah, here's her account. And not only that, but Saudi Arabia, due to our relationship with Saudi Arabia, our reliance on oil, or at least supposed reliance on oil, the understanding that the main commodity that has underpinned the dollar since the energy crisis of 1974 has been oil. And in order to secure that, we
Well, hold on a second here before we go too far. There's a piece of an acronym in here I'm not familiar with, and she doesn't seem to describe it. What's MBS? Do you know?
Mohammed bin Salman.
Ah, gotcha.
Yep. So MBS is the leader of Saudi Arabia, or the heir apparent there. I don't know if you remember Khashoggi, the Khashoggi assassination, but
Is
his
this
whole,
related to the Khashoggi assassination in some way, or no?
I mean,
Everybody that dies for some tie to the U.S.
well, I think if you begin to understand or to think in terms of the United States relationships with leaders of other countries, and that we and that we stage coups, that we have other leaders of other countries killed, you begin to understand the light of the Khashoggi. And Khashoggi was a writer for either the New York Times or the Washington Post. I believe the Washington Post, which is part of the reason there was
Washington Post sounds right.
yeah.
There's a curious tie to Jeff Bezos there too.
And I don't know if you remember the details of that assassination, but he was lured into the Saudi Arabian embassy in
Well,
Turkey.
wasn't he beheaded or something like that?
Well, he was butchered and taken out in suitcases.
Yeah.
So those details aside, though, he was a dissident who was living in the United States and complaining about the Saudi regime. They were unhappy about that. They considered him to still be um, answerable to their rule of law, their understanding of world order, and they did not like what he was saying here in the United States, and they silenced him. So, and that could
Silence. This is the euphemism, like how people say dead on TikTok, unalived, right? That's
I, I you know I'm a I have a queasy stomach. I don't like some of these. I don't like some of these details, and I like to think of it also in terms of, you know, there's a humanitarian and a personal understanding of the wrongness and the awfulness of that situation, but on a larger and a grander time scale that spans people, that speaks to regimes, that speaks to relationships of countries, I think is it's more important to understand, especially that in a larger context, and not only that, but the Khashoggi killing, but also the precarious nature of the leadership of Saudi Arabia because of their relationship to oil.
And the
And
story she's referring to here, this is not some news story on Bloomberg. This thing dates back to 2016. So there's some new developments here.
so, yes, there's new developments. Now, one thing that we need to understand is what's called the milkshake. Have you heard of the milkshake with regards to United States monetary
The
policy?
only milkshake that I know is the one that brings all the boys to the yard.
Well, we've got a milkshake that brings all the boys to the yard in the United States, and that is, you know, we've talked about the IMF and the World Bank, and you know, Kathleen also calls them recently loan sharks, and I'm going to have to adopt that because it is very true to the nature of the World Bank and the IMF, and um, as innocently or as beneficently as they were conceived, they have become institutions that that essentially take resources, take money and treasure from countries rather than bring them into the world system. Um, and in doing so, you know, when the United States begins to realize that um, we created the international monetary system, Bretton Woods, 1944, and we said the United States has all this gold, and we're gonna base the world system on the dollar, and we're going to keep, the dollar is a stable currency that's pegged to the amount of gold that we have, and we promise that we're not going to lie about the supply of dollars. But immediately we go off of that and we begin to print and create dollars. Well, central banks and countries were very understood that very early on, and so we used subterfuge. We used arm twisting. The United States military, the CIA, the State Department, to force them into agreements, and to force them into the agreements at look at what we've done throughout the world. Why does Iran hate us today? Because because we created a puppet regime there that was part of the money laundering game of the United States dollar, and the country got wind of it and overthrew that regime and has resented the United States since then. There are many other countries whose regimes may not love the United States, but the um, understand the tightrope that they must walk on, and Saudi Arabia is one of these regimes. So the the milkshake is we'll loan you dollars. You know that we're making fake dollars, or we're not. You know that we are counterfeiting dollars and creating more than we admit to that there exists with the price of gold. But the payoff is that you can spend those dollars on American corporations and land in America, or land in first world countries like Britain. And because we're making so many dollars, you know, we're not going to admit to the rate of inflation of the supply of dollars, and those people who are the leaders of these various countries will have access to those. They can have suitcases full of cash, and as long as everyone in the world believes it, you can go out and take advantage of, you know, somebody with real estate, or somebody who owns a house, or some company that exists in the United States that's selling stocks. So that's the milkshake. You bring the milk back to the yard, and the The dollars go out to these various countries, and some of that money gets funneled into, scare quote, make improvements in the country to bring them into the first world. But the leaders of those countries participate in the scheme as long as they're bringing those dollars back to the United States to inject in especially American corporations. And that's the milkshake. So China, go ahead, Grant, go ahead, because I'm going off on a long rant, and let me know if there's any part of that that's not clear.
Well, I guess, was there one of the links that I should bring up that talks specifically about the milkshake? I didn't get that one on the screen quite yet.
I can try to find one. You can try to find one. The milkshake is that's a pretty common understanding of the dollar system, especially since the 70s, since the Nixon shock. Because remember too, we had a discussion that Nixon did not take the United States off of gold. Nixon admitted to the rest of the world that we were artificially or that we were counterfeiting dollars and sending out fake dollars to the rest of the world. So that's why it's truly the Nixon shock. Nixon didn't take us off gold. We had long been off gold before that.
The shock was that he actually admitted to it.
Yes, the shock. That's exact. Well, the shock was that, yes, that he admitted to it, and this is why I think we also we don't understand the true high road that Nixon took, and we he's known as I'm not a crook. I am not a crook. And you could also see the retribution that was made unto him by the companies, the corporations that were benefiting from the milkshake, and they all thought that was a scheme that was going to come tumbling down, but instead the leadership of all these various countries around the world said, it's too complex for everyone to understand, and those people who do understand it are going to go participate in this great money laundering scheme. So yeah, God bless Nixon for taking the moral high ground, even though it cost him his political career and reputation. So fast forward to the energy shock of 1974. The United States is all of these countries around the world believe in this notion of efficiency. We've got to have industrial production. In order for that, we need to have energy so that we can have jobs, so we can tell people to go out and do something. You get people working, driving around in their autos, keep their houses heated and everything, and they will not look at the divergence between the class systems that exist in the world, those who stand next to government and in the financial institutions that are aligned with government, and how they're getting ahead and owning everything. As long as we tell them that there's a job and that they can go out and do something, then the system will sustain itself. So here comes our reliance on energy, and notice that this is still a very important factor in the discussion of what our government is doing for us. Well, we're going to secure you jobs. We're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to find some energy, and that's true with the Biden administration, who found energy by depleting the strategic oil reserve. It's what Trump is focused on in opening up lands to energy production, drill, baby, drill. It's what the war in Ukraine is all about: selling liquefied natural gas to Europe.
So this was the best thing I could find, where they're talking about the dollar milkshake theory, or they're alluding to it in the context of the Bitcoin milkshake. So if I got the right thing? The only other thing I could find was an article from 2022, but there wasn't anything in Wikipedia that related to Nixon and milkshake or dollar.
Well, this is the dollar milkshake theory and the natural progression of this to the Bitcoin milkshake. And so this is part of my concern when you understand how how the dollar milkshake has bound the world together and separated governments from actually acting in the interest of their constituency. um, it both makes me leery of the strategic asset reserves held by the Bitcoin, because the Bitcoin was about making the world more fair. And if the Bitcoin merely underpins a currency that the people who are in control of the strategic reserve of Bitcoin can then inflate and pay off people for participating in that system, then we will be locked in the same system. And instead of gold or instead of oil, it will now be based on Bitcoin. And I worry that I worry that just because it's something new and it had the possibility of of bringing fairness to the world by using it, then our system is going to be corrupted, and the milkshake will perpetuate until we begin to understand that we need to be actually making stable coins that are answerable to the populations, not the government.
Well, this idea of strategic reserve as a moniker for just putting a bunch of bitcoins under the control of some particular thing. I mean, this is such a misnomer. I mean, when we talk about a strategic reserve, we're just talking about any other buyer that's buying Bitcoin. Like, why is that any different to you? Like, if a government holds Bitcoin, it's not any more weaponized than if Michael Saylor or the Winklevoss twins has a big pile of bitcoins. Like, bitcoins are bitcoins, and they don't care who buys them. Why the distinction? Because if you are underpinning debt with Bitcoin, like that's another thing entirely. It's if you hoodwink the world into convincing everybody that they should accept your token, your coin, that's no different than anything else that's happening in crypto.
Because it still gives, we were about getting rid of the banks or the middleman, because they can abuse our trust, and they can inflate their currency, whatever it may be, if we're basing it on this notion of a reserve. The problem is partial reserve banking, and whenever you
Okay, but I think that's just like a reuse of the term. I mean, whether a specific government creates a currency and forces people to use it, that's a tale as old as time. But whether the world has an alternative that is outside of this control, I think that doesn't change given the accumulation of a particular party. And if you see that a country that's in control of a fiat system and can open up an unlimited printer, that's going to create this global race that has been speculated by Saylor and others for quite some time, that when we start to see the true race for who's going to acquire a significant amount of Bitcoin and use it to do things internally within their countries, this is the software scenario that was posited by Lowry and others. I think Adam Back has been talking about this for quite some time, and he said we're firmly into it now. I don't know if you saw his post, but he recently said that on Twitter or X.
I didn't, but again, crypto brought us a technology to where we could no longer have to rely on trusting somebody who's holding a reserve. So um, th- that the benefiters from the previous system are looking to put Bitcoin in a box, and to rebuild the system on top of Bitcoin is something that we should be very wary of. So, but let's not dwell on this. We've had this. We've dug into the problems of the strategic reserve. It exists, and mind you, I went to also go back to the formation of the national banking system in 1862, 1863, and 1864. Because if you go back and look at what the national banking system did, it didn't seize gold and put gold in the hands of the government. It printed dollars, and it paid out to banks who participated in the national banking scheme. Those banks, the financiers, they were paid off in gold. And when it became when the private banks had amassed all of the gold in the United States, that's whenever FDR seizes the gold, that's when FDR seizes the gold and puts it in the control and says, you know what, we're going to secure that for you. But you now get privileged access to the dollars. So this is a we keep seeing this system remade over gold, over oil, now over Bitcoin. And so if we're trying to blaze up a new path forward, then we need to be very wary of this. But let's fast forward back
Yeah,
to
getting back to the shadow dollar.
back to the shadow dollar. So in the 70s, as that system had the possibility of breaking down, we were looking for some other strategic reserve to propel a narrative of how the world trades together, how commerce binds the world together. And in doing so, we needed to secure oil. There was a lot of oil in the Middle East. They had a small population. They did not have political clout, and so we cut a deal with the ruling regimes of many of those countries, and they could borrow dollars, and as long as they spent them on American companies, then they had both privileged rates and also were. By the way, they could only sell the oil. You can see that in the diagram here. Back to the United States. And we've been seeing this system break down. Last year in July was the first year that OPEC, the oil producing economic cartel, I think is what that stands for, or exchange cartel.
It's got to be consortium. There's no way that it's cartel. I'll have to look that up. I love it though. That's great. Cartel.
Look it up. I mean, it's known as a cartel or the oil cartel. They actually, and it was created by the United States so that we could adjust and control the price of oil for all of these various countries that we were giving dollars to, and that was done conveniently under one organization. Well, we created
Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. But
countries.
I think cartel is better.
Oh, whoops. Freudian slip. So
Oil producing exporting cartel.
yeah, exporting to whom? To the United States. And anyway, they actually adjusted the price of oil without consulting the United States back in January, and that was the first time that had ever occurred. What else has been happening is, China wanted in on this system too, and fast forwarding to the 80s. Also, think about, I mentioned Nixon earlier. Think about Nixon's open trade policies with China. And anyway, Nick and Reagan sort of the response to that. But China, we've opened up a lot of trade with. China could understood absolutely what the United States was doing with the dollar and what countries were participating in that. And they said, oh, the United States is looking to is looking for cheap goods and cheap labor. We need to bring China into this new world system. We can provide that. We can plan our economy to provide this cheap labor for especially the United States. And in doing so, if they issue us if they send us dollars, or allow us to buy treasury bonds, then we'll do that, and until we rise up in parity to the United States. And so that's what's been happening for the last 40, 35, 40 years. And China has been doing that with an eye on recreating the American control of the world, in their own way, which we now call like the Belt and Road Initiative. And they say that building infrastructure and building ties in the various countries around the world, and doing what the United States has promised to do, which is to build commerce in between nations, to bind the nations' views of a shared future together, So that's what they've done. But the United States, because we can create dollars, the ruling class of the United States has become addicted to this money laundering scheme. So China has been holding on to a massive amount of dollars. I believe they have $900 billion, sitting around in I'm picturing Scrooge McDuck in his vault, swimming in all of his cash. So China has a massive amount of dollars, and Saudi Arabia has preferential the ability to lend dollars out with preferential rates, because in the deals that they cut with the United States back in the 70s, they were given the ability to lend the dollar out at rates that were lower than what we allowed other countries who were allowed into the system to do, and that established a special relationship between us and led our foray into the oil producing exporting countries of the Middle East.
Well, and speaking of China's treasuries, this was something that you pointed out to me, that Tether's the one that's been hoovering up all of this treasuries, which is, I think we've covered this quite extensively with respect to what is Tether's role in propping up the US dollar. Like, why does the dollar keep getting a free pass? Somehow crypto came in and saved it.
Yeah, crypto did come in and save it, and we should bear in mind, where is Tether headquartered? They're headquartered in Hong Kong. The treasuries are custodied by Cantor Fitzgerald. Trump's selection for the head of Treasury is the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. So you begin to understand how precarious the system is whenever you begin
You
to look.
know, honestly, I don't, it doesn't look precarious to me. It looks like they're setting it all up, right? Strategic Reserve, Bitcoin, the guy from Cantor Fitzgerald who does the custody. I
Well,
mean, it's all just lining up.
I say precarious in like the actual number of, like, the incredibly small number of parties that it takes to keep the system going. And meanwhile, everybody, loves Tether, uses Tether, and is so excited about crypto. Put Bitcoin in a box. The United States creates its own uh, or a cryptocurrency that's in its control, because I don't think that there's a lot of difference between USDC. I'm not as familiar with Circle, but I guarantee you that the United States Treasury Department is very interested in controlling Tether and controlling USDC. And at the very least, if those are pegged to the dollar and they're buying United States treasuries in order to sustain that, then people have this mirage of, oh, I'm getting off of the dollar.
What it feels like to me is that there's a system that's about to be set up between all these players to push the Federal Reserve out of the way. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like they're about ready to like kick these guys to the curb. And I think if anybody's going to do that, it's going to be Trump, especially since he's got the ear of, or like Ron Paul and the rest of these libertarians that have wanted this to happen for a long time have his ear or have an inroad in there. Like, I mean, it's they're putting a bug in his ear about all this.
Well, and this is also something that I would fear. But going back to the milkshake in the United States, companies, the stock market, think about how that works, propelled by, the Federal Reserve is exactly that. It's a Federal Reserve, and that reserve was of gold, and we been off of that federal. We've been off of that gold ostensibly since the 40s, certainly since the 70s, and that didn't change the financial players from. I don't know. To me, we need to understand this, going back to the Treasury and the notion of selling debt through the Treasury. The Federal Reserve was a false front, or a uh, was where the Treasury sold bonds. Like, if you go back to Jay Cook, and begin to understand that the Treasury, this notion of selling war bonds or selling debt, and finding somebody to go out and who had enough rich friends, or who was slick enough to sell debt to various people around the world, then that's where the Federal Reserve comes in. And this is how the system works. It's finding a dupe to buy all of that. Well, who's the dupe been for many years? It's been Americans who go to work and believe in the 401k, and they put all their money into the future, and they end up in some part buying and sustaining that debt.
Well, that's an interesting point about like what's really happening with 401k, because this was a vehicle that got a lot of people to bury their money in this thing that gets locked up for a very long time. And I think it's been something that has been speculated that when the the United States becomes truly insolvent, what pot of money are they going to go after? You know, like when the Nixon shock happened and they went out and collected up all the gold and said it was illegal to hold it. I Some have speculated that the 401k system was set up in a similar fashion, that this is now the ability to go seize all of this stuff. And the ETFs have been criticized. The Bitcoin ETFs have been criticized in a similar fashion, that these things are under the control and the ability for the U.S. government to come knock on the door and get it.
Well, this is other things that I worry about, because if if you bind everybody, if we're lending ourselves money and we figure out that we can't pay ourselves, or we want to forgive those people who are holding the debt, then we can reset the system, and that's very important, because compounding interest doesn't make sense and requires somebody to be unable to pay. So if you start writing a promissory note and writing it in your left hand and handing it to your right, if it goes, if it's one group of people who are promising and giving themselves debt, then then it resets, they're all holding the bag. But again, those people who understand that are looking to get out of it, and this is in some ways why I worry about the Bitcoin being a golden parachute for countries to shift into other areas of the world. This is also why I think what China is doing with the dollars, and in an agreement with Saudi Arabia, it might be good for the United States, because if various countries around the world continue to use the dollar system but get away from the predatory lending practices of the IMF and the World Bank system, the loan sharking of that system, and they have their own parallel system that is outside of the control of the United States and of Western Europe, then it could be incredibly beneficial, because there are other stakeholders in the game and who have an interest in maintaining the use of the dollar.
Let's go back to this IMF graphic that we had on the screen a minute ago. What is this one supposed to be talking about? So you pointed this one out to me. Well, Kathleen Tyson was talking about this. So what do we got going on here? What's she trying to point out?
Okay, so this is the again, the IMF is the International Monetary Fund that loans out money. Where does that money come from? It comes from money that is held in the World Bank. And countries who want to have preferential rates or loan rates in the IMF World Bank system put money into the World Bank, and the amount of money gives them credit for better rates, and also, more importantly, better trade deals with the various countries in that system. This is where we get these words like first world, second world, and third world. First world being those countries who had a lot of money, dollars that were held by the World Bank. Second world were countries that were giving preferential rates to their resources and the goods that were produced in those countries to participate in that system. So maybe in the future they could get money stored in the World Bank, and they could benefit from the predation of other countries in the world. Third world countries being those who did not want to participate in that system.
And the pledge to anybody taking these IMF dollars is the assets of the country, or the
Abs-
mineral rights and whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I also have been very wary of the uh, of 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 the similarities that have been put forth between Trump and Javier Milei, because um, if the richest man in the world doesn't pay his taxes and speaks two languages and has a bunch of girlfriends, like, we look at him in one way. If the poorest man in the world does all those things, we look at it a very different way. Well, here's Argentina, the country that owes more money to the IMF by a large margin. And whenever we look at the quote unquote the government cutting and the government reduction and the libertarian policies that are pursued by Javier Milei, well, the question we should be asking, like, what's going to take its place? And if in taking its place, he's just selling out the country to the creditors that they owe all of their money to, then that looks a lot differently than establishing sovereignty or actually bailing the country out of their debt and
Well, and that was, I think that was the common understanding that that was what was happening, but you're speculating that it's actually he's setting this all up for the IMF.
Oh, absolutely. Like, Javier Milei has sold. We talk about selling the land of the United States to China, and worry about the Irish taking over Apple because they have better tax structure there. Um, this is what's happening in Argentina, and because it's in some ways American companies, but also others. I mean, uh, where was Elon Musk a couple of months ago? He was in Argentina. What was he doing in Argentina? He was signing deals for the extraction of lithium, so Argentina could pay off some of its debt to the IMF. Well, what were they paying it off with? They were paying it off with money from Tesla. And what were they giving up in the wake of that? They were giving up lithium. Was that the best price of lithium that they could have got? I doubt it. Do the people of Argentina get to benefit from that, or do the former leaders and the current leaders of the country who've participated in the milkshake shake scheme and wandered off with billions of dollars and left the country holding the bag? You know, uh, I would be more interested in a leader who is doing that. But when we have leaders do that, then we have the United States State Department and CIA to run around and scream about authoritarianism and unfairness and lawfare and the abuse of former politicians. And so they protect those people who are participating in the milkshake scheme.
So that's how this all ties back together. Is you're saying the IMF and what's happening in Argentina? This all ties back to the milkshake, and that's how it's connected to the shadow dollar.
Well, and it's also connected to the preferential arrangements, the loan sharking, the things that are not in the best interest of these countries. And there are many countries that exist in the world who have thought this is terribly unfair. China, the leader of them, who are looking to establish a different way. And they say the United States has been right about commerce and right about, like, a limited amount of capitalism, or the right about the ability to participate and create things and to pass them around the world. But they say that the United States is not held to its values in promising to bring other countries up to its level. Instead, it promises to bring them into that system and then keeps them as in indentured servitude. Loans them money that they can never pay back, that forces them into the perpetual system. So China and Saudi Arabia recently have said, well, we have all of these dollars. Part of the problem of remaking the dollar system is once things are denominated in such a large pool of dollars, how do you remake and rebuild that trust? And they said, oh, well, maybe we don't have to. We already have $900 billion for a liquidity pool. We have we have a place that has the ability to have a wide gamut of rates in which to lend out dollars to other countries of the world. Let's just recreate that system, and we can start loaning our dollars to the rest of the countries of the world. And instead of them being forced to be funneled through American businesses and leaders who are bound to American interests, we can pass those dollars around outside of that system. And that's the shadow system. And going back to the gold too, we just saw the UAE, which is a tiny city state that sits basically within Saudi Arabia. We just saw the gold, the second leading hub of gold trade in the world, move to the UAE. And you can see that if the system originally started on this notion of gold backing the system, and countries around the world wanting to get back to a currency that's based on gold, you can see them trying to recreate that system, and it begins to make more sense as to why the UAE has overtaken the UK and will probably overtake New York as the leading hub of gold exchange in the world. You know, it's also a convenient place because it sits on the edge of Asia and Africa and Europe. And that's an ideal location for some very large markets that exist. So that's pretty much what I wanted to lay out with regards to keeping an eye on that. You know, we talk a lot too about BRICS, and just to address that, you know, and BRICS is a very real thing, but we have to think about where BRICS comes from. You know, BRICS was originally an investment portfolio that was put forth for the American stock market. So if you remember before 2008, whenever you went to invest your 401k, they would say, oh, well, what about BRICS? There are all of these emerging second world countries. And you can invest in Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and take advantage of these predatory loans that I mean, this is not what they were saying, but this is what was happening. The predatory loans that have been given by the IMF, and these countries are beginning to participate in the scheme, and that will promise rewards to an American investor. And then when we had a foible, a retraction of faith in that system in 2008, you know, there was a wailing and gnashing of teeth in the United States as we thought the system was going to come to an end, but we were very largely insulated from it. But there were countries that were absolutely not insulated from it, because where did the money retract from? It retracted from those BRICS portfolios. And if you look around at those countries, you can see the political fallout that happened in those countries that were not prepared to have this promise of economy, of building things, of putting people to work and pulling them out of poverty. Those countries stalled out and had to recover and pivot. And in doing so, they said, well, we're not gonna trust that system again. You know, like, not only does the United States sanction, if there's anything that goes wrong with the system, they're going to protect themselves before they ever protect us.
Yeah,
And
this
so,
weaponization of the US dollar, I think that's the way that that's commonly referred to, right? And this has been the pushback from BRICS and the rest of these countries, is that, you know, if you're gonna weaponize this system against us, then we definitely have to find an alternative thing to participate in, because otherwise, you know, we're just beholden to the money masters here.
yes, and in the recreation of the dollar, they found that it's a tricky thing to get everybody to believe in an airdrop of banknotes, and to, you know, to increase that without, say, paying off the leaders of those countries for 100 years in order to participate in the scheme. So they've pursued these notions of both commodity swaps, commodity swaps, commodity agreements between various countries to provide resiliency and less of a dependence on trades in the dollar. And they have also focused on a payment network. So think about, Visa, MasterCard in the United States, that is a quasi-private a payment network. And it's not the actual banks, but it's a payment network. So BRICS has been creating a payment network apart from encouraging and setting up the structure for those commodity swap agreements and alliances between various countries around the world. But they have not been able to create a currency that's generally used by all these countries of the world. So here again, they have an option to use the current system, but with less control of the country that's been making the dollar.
Fascinating subject. I guess something that I'll need to spend a bit more time looking up, and we'll have to keep an eye on this as more things develop into the future. But we're out of time on FOMO. We'll catch you tomorrow.
All right. See you tomorrow.